Welcome to The Fairer Sense.
With me, Tanya.
And me, Kara.
Women, money, and the fight to break even.
Because we give a shit. And you should too. Today, the second episode in our two-part series on the economics of wellness. A diet by any other name.
Hey, Kara.
Hey, Tanya.
Here, back again, talking wellness some more. Such a broken system.
There's so much more to be explored, frankly. And we're just the detectives to explore it.
We need like a Carmen Sandiego type theme song about how we dig into these issues deeply. No, I don't know. That's a terrible idea. Please ignore me. But we are, in fact, going to talk more about wellness today. And if you haven't already listened to episode 31 on wellness and yoga culture, please go back and listen to that first, because we will be referring to some of those things as we move it forward today to focus more on the diet side of things.
Today, we're really going to be focusing more on wellness and weight loss or diet culture, because this is such a huge part of how we talk about food and health in the United States. And it's definitely a huge part of what we mean by wellness.
Yeah, this is me sounding old for a sec, but I did recently turn 40, so I'm just going to own that. There was a time that I remember very clearly when the diet and weight loss industry really just talked about diet and weight loss. Products literally to this day still are called Diet blank. Diet Coke was something I drank a lot of growing up. Diet Dr. Pepper is a delicious and super unhealthy soda. The word diet didn't used to be kind of a bad word, but now it really is, because we've shifted to talk about wellness and things like clean eating and stuff, which is really dressing up a concept that is an old one, but in a different way that actually makes it more insidious. A piece that recently came out was an opinion piece by Jessica Knoll in the New York Times called Smash the Wellness Industry. And the subtitle of it is, Why Are So Many Smart Women Falling for Its Harmful Pseudoscientific Claims? That we're linking to in the show notes, but it's a really powerful piece that I really recommend you listen to. She talks about her experiences talking to her women friends and colleagues and just kind of the commonalities that we share in this very toxic diet culture. But this is a quick excerpt from it. She says, I called this poisonous relationship between a body I was indoctrinated to hate and food I had been taught to fear wellness. This was before I could recognize wellness culture for what it was, a dangerous con that seduces smart women with pseudoscientific claims of increasing energy, reducing inflammation, lowering the risk of cancer, and healing skin, gut, and fertility problems. But at its core, wellness is about weight loss. It demonizes calorically dense and delicious foods, preserving a vicious fallacy. Thin is healthy and healthy is thin.
Oh my gosh, amen to this. How many times in your life have you been a part of a conversation with a group of women who are just like bashing on their bodies, or are like, oh, I'm going to be so bad, I'm going to eat a piece of chocolate cake or something? Because we live in a world where it's okay to say, I'm going to be bad, I'm going to eat a piece of chocolate cake. We've demonized chocolate cake. And listen, is cake the healthiest thing in the world? Actually, truly, no. But is it going to kill you? No. And we have these weird conflations. And I think now, too, with the rise of influencer culture and anyone can be an expert, we're in this weird spot where people are hopping on Instagram or Twitter and they're saying, I lost 50 pounds and now I'm an expert. And it's like, you have no training, you have no background in this. Maybe you did that thing, but your methods are not necessarily going to work for me. Maybe I don't need to lose 50 pounds, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all part of this vortex of we view women through the lens of their body primarily, and that body better adhere to these thin standards. And if you need to hate chocolate cake or hate yourself or follow these weird pseudoscientific claims, then you better fucking do that.
It is super gendered, which I think is the thing that we want to get to today. We're going to talk a bit about weight loss science, the fact that we're really starting to see, and I think more people are starting to understand, that all the stuff people say, work out more, eat less, all this stuff, that it doesn't necessarily lead to weight loss, and that it's incredibly hard, nearly impossible to sustain weight loss long term. And we know from science that fat people don't really eat more than thin people. We know that a lot of it is cultural and socioeconomic. I mean, there's all this stuff that even medical doctors still don't accept necessarily. But that's not what we're focusing on as much as the gendered aspect of it. The fact that for women, wellness and weight loss are different than they are with men. They just are. In that piece, Jessica Knoll is talking about going out to eat with her friends and that they are sitting around when discussing what to order, bashing their bodies, which I think most women can relate to. But she says, I don't think the men over there ordering hamburgers are having the same conversation. And that's really what's at the heart of this.
Yeah. And I think it's very important to point out this gendered nonsense in weight loss because there are plenty of men with eating disorders. And I really want to acknowledge that and say that, the harmful lens of weight loss can definitely get shown upon men. But we don't even use the same language to describe certain habits in men and women. And I'm thinking particularly of Jack Dorsey, who is the CEO of Twitter. And Dorsey famously has a really strange relationship with food. He only eats dinner. And he talks a lot about how fasting really serves him. So he only eats between 6:30 and 9 p.m. And in any other lens, that's a full-blown eating disorder. But there have been articles written about how now that this, Twitter billionaire is doing this, he's being mimicked. He's being praised as like a health guru. And people are talking about how it gives them more energy and it clears the mind. And it's like, whoa, 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 let's step back from this for a second and think about how would this be treated if we read that a woman only ate one meal a day? Probably not with applause, right? Probably not with, oh, you're a guru. It would probably be, oh my gosh, you're like trapped in this prison of weight loss or you have an eating disorder or something here. And I think these reactions, I don't want to say Dorsey has an eating disorder. I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose him, but I think he has an unhealthy relationship with food for sure. And people are reacting to it as you're so smart and cool, whereas women would be demonized for it.
Yeah, it's really a very telling gender divide. And you were even generous in your description of it because the things that I've read, he only eats 5 meals a week because he also fasts all weekend long. And that for dinner, he only eats meat and vegetables. So he eats like 5 steaks and a handful of veggies, and that's his food for the week. For the week. And people act like that's brilliant. And when a tech bro does it, it's called biohacking. And when a normal woman does it, it's called an eating disorder. That just tells us a lot about our wellness culture, that even taking the same action is interpreted very differently for different people. I've heard people in the disability community or people who are fat talk about going to the gym and being laughed at for that, when if they didn't do those things, they would be criticized for not doing those things and called lazy. And so we just have all these messed up things within wellness and weight and dieting that are so tied up in other structures of power in our society. It's good as women in particular to see how this stuff affects us so that we can try to repair some of that damage and try to step away from it a bit.
Yeah. And again, just like we talked about in our first episode in this series about where are the dollars flowing, in 2018, the weight loss industry was a $72 billion industry. There's a lot of money in this, and it really comes down to policing what we're putting into our bodies. And just to give you an idea of how much some of these companies are making, Jenny Craig in 2018 had $400 million in revenue, and Slim Fast, which I can't even believe is still around, had $350 million in revenue. And it's absolutely bonkers to me that these are fake foods, especially Slim Fast. It's like these weird shakes and bars, but people buy into it because the promise is you will lose weight. And that is ultimately the goal, right? How thin can I be? I mean, there's that quote. I don't know who originally said it, but you can never be too thin or too rich. We in the United States live in this culture of give me more money, help me lose more weight.
So today, to continue the conversation about all of this stuff we've talked about and so much more, we have one interview and one produced segment, and then we'll come right back and chat some more about all this.
I spoke with Rachel Hartley, who is a private practice dietitian who calls herself a non-diet dietitian. And we started off our conversation talking about how wellness culture is still diet culture and how these ideas of detoxing or clean eating are still harmful, especially to women.
Diet culture has become so insidious nowadays. I think, years back, the diet industry realized like the actual phrase diet is kind of passe. So they're very much trying to rename things like, wellness. I think the best example of this is, Weight Watchers, and they're rebranding to WW, but it's still a diet, and it's gaslighting. It allows it, because of course these things are very much targeted at women, and it really allows people to fall into these disordered eating behaviors and have that hidden under the guise of health. I think too, it also redefines health into something that really isn't health anymore. Before, when you would say that you were eating healthy, you might be thinking about like, yeah, I'm like eating some fruits and vegetables, and like I cook at home sometimes. But now, when I work with clients, a lot of times when they think about making healthy changes to their eating patterns, they're feeling like, oh, and now I have to like avoid anything that has more than like blank number of ingredients, and I have to detox, like, and do all these sort of like crazy supplements. And it really is redefining health away from something that health actually is, and towards something that's frankly not very attainable for a lot of people who, might have either financial barriers or time barriers. And of course, we have to note too that so much, like it says health, but like it's very much implied that is really just thinness. The health is being marketed with thin women who, look a certain way.
Along the money line, I did a little digging, and the global wellness economy, which what a phrase, was $4.2 trillion in 2017. And in 2017, the weight loss market was worth 66 billion, which are both just huge numbers. That's so much money. And really, all of this money is coming from people buying into these products or these workout programs or what have you. And so my question is, fundamentally, do you think that how we talk about food and health in the United States is broken? And how can we counter weight loss narratives with actual healthy eating information? How do we reclaim health?
Yes. Yeah. That is just a staggering amount of money. I actually hadn't heard the 4.2 trillion. And I think it's important to note too, and that the $66 billion weight loss industry, remembering that this is money that's made off of like repeat customers. This is like selling one diet that inevitably doesn't work, and then, coming back and buying the next product. So that was another product that you were buying. Like we wouldn't get it again. But with dieting, that's a cycle that we really get trapped into. First and foremost, there is this underlying assumption that thinness is healthy and fatness is bad. That health is something that we can look at someone and be able to tell whether they are healthy or not based on their body size. And there's a ton of research that really shows that weight, really isn't like this defining aspect of health. I really encourage anyone who this is like, mind-blowing information to them to look into health at every size. Essentially, a lot of what we're told about health and weight just really isn't accurate. So I think this underlying assumption is something that gets the discussion of food and health very much off track. Now, one of the other things that I see as a major issue is this focus on individual behaviors versus systems and public health. It sort of implies that health is very much something that is 100% in our control. And certainly there are aspects to our health that we do have control over. You think about like smoking or, some certain like eating behaviors, like eating more vegetables, but that is really just part of our health. It's about 33% of our health is dictated by individual behaviors. And within those individual behaviors, it's not just food and fitness. Like that's not the only individual behaviors that matter, but this focus on individual behaviors makes it seem like health is something that is totally within our control and really distracts from making systemic changes that can improve our health and well-being as a nation, as a population. Just this focus of food and fitness as being like the panacea of health, like that's part of health. That's not all of health. What about sleep? What about our social connections? What about our environment? Why have food and fitness been put up on a pedestal? It's probably goes back to that $4.2 trillion market that you mentioned, because you can make a lot of money off of that.
I love that point of there's, mental health, there's social health, there's sleep. These are all under the banner of health, but we really get narrowed down into thinking it's what we put into our body and how our body looks.
I mean, I'm a dietitian. Obviously, I value nutrition and the effect that it has on our health and well-being. I want it also to be in its rightful place. Like, I don't want food and nutrition to come at the expense of other aspects of health. So, when I have a client who they're trying to achieve health is meaning like following a very rigid dietary pattern, and that means, that they can't go out to eat with their friends. Is that really something that is improving their well-being? I don't really think so.
A lot of times in the personal finance community, people make parallels between things like paying off debt and weight loss. And they both take commitment and they both take a plan. Actually, let's zoom out and talk about the fact that we are a culture of debt, that it is so easy to go into debt, that we have credit card offers coming to our homes every single day, encouraging us to go into debt. How do we fix that problem rather than just yelling at people for being in debt?
Right. No, that's actually such a fantastic parallel because, it very much ignores the systemic barriers that in many cases prevent people from being able, like we put it down to willpower, just come up with a plan and stick to it. But it's not as simple as that because we're like actual human beings with very real needs. Like in the case of food, like the need for fuel to energize your body to do all of its bodily functions. So boiling it down to this kind of willpower thing and shaming people when they can't stick to a plan really just ignores the fact that like there are these very systemic barriers that make that incredibly challenging.
So I Googled feminist nutritionist.
Yeah. I love that I came up for that.
You did. You were like the second result because of your blog post called Food, Dieting, and Feminism. And I really encourage all our listeners to go read it. And so you tied in a lot of things that I feel really strongly about. You tied in Trump's offensive comments about women's bodies with the fact that women face 16 times more workplace discrimination than men based on bodies. And you shared that by prioritizing thinness over health, by prioritizing dieting, we feed into these narratives. As long as we believe that we are better when we are thinner, we help perpetuate a cycle that traps us. But it's also like, again, zooming out, thinking systemic. I've wanted to be thinner and I try not to blame myself for that because we live in a world that says, be thin, be thin. And you had this line that I loved. Dieting is a distraction from the hard work we women need to do to achieve equal standing in this society. So my question is, after all of this, how do you want to change the literal language that we use around food and health?
This is something that I really try to, in my conversations, acknowledge because we live in a culture that very much, stigmatizes and oppresses certain bodies and puts other bodies up on a pedestal. So I would never want for me, especially me as like a thin white woman, to sound like, pursuing weight loss, like you're bad for doing that. That's wrong. Like I would never want to sound like that. I always hope that in these conversations that it comes off that I'm criticizing those who are profiting off of selling dieting and not the dieter themselves. Because the reality is we just live in this culture that I really see my purpose as providing women with choice, as providing people with autonomy. When we live in this culture that defines health in a certain way, that prioritizes certain bodies, it really strips us of a lot of autonomy. It's sort of like, spend your entire life pursuing thinness and take this like giant chunk of physical energy and mental energy and put it towards this thing that might not actually even like help you live a life that's in line with your values values. It's very much a cycle that we get trapped in. In my practice, I really try to just like provide my clients with choice and autonomy and information so that they're really able to make their mind up about what are things that are going to help me when I look at health in this broader context. Like, what are things that are going to help me take care of my health in this, in my physical and mental health. Lastly, just also helping people challenge these kind of myths about thinness and helping them just live a better life in their here and now body. Because all these things that we're told that we're sort of sold this idea of like, once you're in this smaller body, like all these wonderful things are going to happen. And you can have you can have a wonderful life in any body. And so I want to really help my clients like live a good life, live a life according to their values in the body they're in today.
Big thanks to cloud accounting software FreshBooks for sponsoring Season 4 of The Fairer Sense, the third season of the show they've sponsored in its entirety.
We love FreshBooks, both because they've been such a big supporter of the Fairer Sense and because they provide the simplest, easiest to use cloud accounting software out there, which you can try by visiting freshbooks.com/TFC.
If you're a small business owner or freelancer, there are so many things you have to think about, from actually making money to keeping track of it.
FreshBooks takes the work out of getting paid, so you can focus on doing the work you need to do to keep your business running. With FreshBooks, you can create a customized invoice, track all your income, and link a business credit card to automatically track business spending.
FreshBooks makes it super simple to do your accounting, and it makes accounting one less thing you need to worry about as a business owner, so you can focus instead on crushing the financial patriarchy.
Head to freshbooks.com/TFC to claim your 30-day free trial and enter the Fairer Sense in the How Did You Hear About Us section. You get to try a great product while supporting us. That's freshbooks.com/TFC.
In the last episode, I talked about my 10-year career as a yoga teacher and my feelings about the yoga industrial complex. But in this episode, talking about the diet industrial complex, I wanted to interrogate my own role in perpetuating the notion that wellness equals being thin. When I first moved to LA from DC in 2004, some of the first yoga classes I taught were in Beverly Hills. And I remember very clearly at one of those early classes, a young woman coming up and asking me, "Why do all yoga teachers have such perfect bodies?" I laughed at the time because, like any good self-hating woman raised in our society, I did not consider my body anywhere near perfect, though of course now I'd kill to go back to that body. But in the years since, I've thought about her question often because it's in fact the opposite. It's not that teaching or practicing yoga gives you a perfect body. It's that we mostly only let people with perfect bodies teach yoga. It's the same in virtually all aspects of wellness. We hold up those who already look the part, whether or not they are actually healthy or well, and assume those who don't look the part on every measure, young, thin, beautiful, able-bodied, often white, must be doing things wrong and therefore be unhealthy. The holding up of thin people as the ideal is the pretty veneer on a much worse truth. Wellness culture is another word for fat phobia. We know from research that fat phobia is deadly serious. Yale research found that some people would rather die or give a limb than be fat. Another study found that while smoking is in decline all around the world, some French women are still smoking there because they'd rather be dead than fat. A monumentally important piece Michael Hobbs wrote for the HuffPost last year, titled "Everything You Know About Obesity is Wrong," sums up the problem of fat phobia well. Obesity, we are told, he writes, is a personal failing that strains our healthcare system, shrinks our GDP, and saps our military strength. It is also an excuse to bully fat people in one sentence and then inform them in the next that you are doing it for their own good. That's why the fear of becoming fat, or staying that way, drives Americans to spend more on dieting every year than we spend on video games or movies. 45% of adults say they're preoccupied with their weight some or all of the time, an 11-point rise since 1990. Nearly half of 3 to 6-year-old girls say they worry about being fat. The terrible irony is that for 60 years, we've approached the obesity epidemic like a fad dieter. If we just try the exact same thing one more time, we'll get a different result. And so it's time for a paradigm shift. We're not going to become a skinnier country, but, Hobbes concludes, we still have a chance to become a healthier one. In other words, we hate fat people, we fear becoming fat people, and we can't yet face that there is no actual way to lose weight that is scientifically proven to last. In fact, we fear becoming or staying fat so much that we can't even admit that that's what we're talking about, doing, and spending billions of dollars on, because dieting sounds so passé, so shallow. So instead, we call it wellness, or if you're a white tech bro, maybe biohacking, and we pretend it's about more than weight. I wonder how many of those people would have come to my yoga and spinning classes in LA if I'd known and told them, a few years from now, I'll weigh 40 pounds more than this. Or if I'd have bothered with that stuff if I'd known. Being thin and young at one point in time doesn't make someone a role model or make them immune to future weight gain, but we don't want to think about that. But the diet industry is not going to let up from putting thin, seemingly healthy people in front of us anytime soon. According to industry research, millennials represent the future generation of dieters, surpassing baby boomers in number. Diet companies will need to reach them via social media and influencers with affordable programs, apps, virtual weight loss program options, and peer community support. They don't like structured plans involving personal visits to a brick-and-mortar weight loss center. To paraphrase that report, we don't want to see our diet as a diet. Further proof of that is the whole eat clean marketing ploy. According to the same industry research, dieters want to eat clean, eliminating preservatives, GMOs, artificial flavors, and sweeteners. And this is forcing producers of low-calorie, diet, frozen entrees, and diet companies in general to reformulate their foods. Diet dinner entrees is a $1.9 billion market, and diet soft drinks and artificial sweetener sales continue to decline. Diet soda sales fell an estimated 1.6% to $18.63 billion in 2018, and artificial sweeteners fell to $2.25 billion. Consumers are avoiding these products in an effort to eat clean. Those are their words. But think about all those beautiful Instagram pics we see every day now of a bounty of produce overflowing from a bowl, looking beautifully lit and tempting, far different from what it actually feels like to subsist on barely more than salad. It's hashtagged Eat Clean, but it could very well be funded directly by the diet industry and its army of influencers. Same for diets like keto and paleo, which enjoy the endorsement of seemingly healthy pursuits like CrossFit. So what does it matter? We call dieting wellness and call dieting eating clean, so we're lying to ourselves a little bit. Is that such a bad thing? To answer that question, let's hear from Melinda Parrish, a plus-size model who created this video for HuffPost.
What's the number one oppressor of women in America? It's not the president. It's not a government policy. It's not a public figure. It's not a person at all. It's the diet industry. 85% of women are opting out of important life activities because they don't like how they look. They don't think they're thin enough, pretty enough, sexy enough, good enough. 85% is more than the number of women who are affected by workplace discrimination, equal pay for equal work, or access to birth control. 85% of women are opting out of important life activities. So it truly is the number one issue affecting women in America today. And I personally believe that the diet industry is largely responsible for this because we're constantly being bombarded with images that reinforce the idea that we're not thin enough, that we're not sexy enough, that we're not pretty enough, that we're not good enough. But the really disturbing thing when you think about it is we're opting into this. So we're choosing to participate in the diet culture at large, this thing that is in fact oppressing us. And not only are we choosing to participate in it, we're paying our unequal wages to the tune of $60 billion a year.
It's absolutely true that rates of eating disorders and self-loathing are increasing for men too, but this is still disproportionately an issue affecting women. And as Melinda said, we're complicit in our own oppression because we pay actual money to uphold a system that tells us over and over again all the ways we're not good enough. As Stephanie Shame says in her TEDx talk, we correlate how we look with how much we're worth.
I'm so sick and tired of the tactics that are being used in the health and fitness industries. Have you noticed how fat shaming and body shaming they are? Why is shame and guilt even associated with why we should exercise or what foods we should eat? Not a day goes by where I am not flooded by body shaming tactics, whether it's on TV or social media. Like, for instance, hey guys, try this 3-day juice cleanse so that you can lose those 5 pounds that you gained over break. Or how about, hey, you should come and sign up for my class tomorrow because I know that you're out there brunching on Sunday and you're probably going to feel guilty about everything that you ate. Everything that's around us and being told to us makes us feel bad about our bodies and what we're eating. And sadly, most of us fall into this trap because we now seem to correlate our worth and our value to our weight, shape, and size. Think about it. How many of you woke up this morning, looked at yourself in the mirror, and nitpicked on something about your physical appearance? These are behaviors that are taught. This whole concept of body shaming that is used in the health and fitness industry isn't working. Surely they're going to attest to the fact that it's all in good faith. There's this big bad obesity epidemic on the rise, and we need to do something so that people can exercise and eat healthier. Yes, that's right. But do we have to do it in such a negative way? I'm here to call BS on that because these tactics are not working. In fact, they're harming people physically and emotionally. We need to change the dialogue.
Looking back, I wish I'd done more in my classes to change the dialogue. I wish I hadn't said in spinning classes right after Thanksgiving, let's burn off that pumpkin pie. I wish I hadn't reinforced that perceived straight line between exercise and weight loss, or that the point of exercise is to become or stay thin. I don't think I shamed people in my classes, but there's still plenty of shame that all of us, and most especially fat people, pick up in our society. Here's Samantha Bee from her show Full Frontal in February of this year.
Now, you may be wondering, isn't shaming fat people into dieting worth it if it means they lose weight? You would be Reddit, and you would be wrong. Mainly because diets don't work, assholes! Studies that show diets don't work. UCLA researchers found that the majority of people who lose weight on a diet regain it all within 5 years. Essentially, the only person who doesn't is Christian Bale, who's so good at gaining and losing weight, his next role should be Bridget Jones in Bridget Jones: The Dark Knight. Can a woman have a career, be a mom, and be the Batman? Probably not. What's more, yo-yo dieting may be even harder on your body than just being fat. It's been linked to heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. And some researchers have concluded most dieters would have been better off if they hadn't gone on a diet at all. Bad treatment discourages patients from seeking care. Obese women are more likely to delay mammograms and pap smears, which is partially responsible for the fact that they're more likely to die from breast and cervical cancers. I'm sorry, was that a bummer? I can do it the way Good Morning America does. They're more likely to die from breast and cervical cancers. That did not help.
Our lives literally depend on changing the narrative, both at the doctor and in how we spend our own money and mental energy.
So actually, Tanya, you found this quote that I really liked. In his book, Bad Science, Ben Goldacre says, quote, "We have somehow become collectively obsessed with these absurd, thinly evidenced individual tinkerings in diet, distracting us from simple, healthy eating advice. But more than that, distracting us from the other important lifestyle risk factors for ill health that cannot be sold or commodified. And this is something we heard Rachel say too. It's hard to sell people a product around hanging out with your friends more or getting more sleep, but it's real easy to sell someone a diet bar or a diet shake. The money in the wellness industry is in changing your body, and it's in these products or these classes or these services that will help you change your body, AKA lose weight. And I think that we can never forget that. When we're talking about wellness, we always have to be mindful of where are the dollars going and how are they talking to me? And are they talking to me in a way that they just want me to buy something?
And with weight loss, they always are. And in fact, weight loss is one of the only industries I know of where the goal is actually to get you to not do the thing they are selling, because if everyone lost weight and kept it off, they would very quickly run out of customers. The weight loss industry knows that people don't keep the weight off, and they don't really care. They're not actually trying to make us healthier or to get the weight loss to stick. They, in fact, profit much more from yo-yo dieting, which is incredibly destructive to our health and which we know is actually worse for people than just staying fat in the first place. Kara, you've said it a number of times in this series, but it is just so, so important. When we are looking at a phenomenon or a trend or the way that something is being talked about, we have to look at who is funding that and what their interest in it is. And whether it's from a big company like Weight Watchers doing ads on television, or it's from an influencer on Instagram whose funding is coming from you may not know where, it's the question of like, what do they stand to gain from saying this? And how am I taking this in? How is this affecting me? And the stats are really bleak on that. We know we're spending tons of money, that women are spending a huge amount of mental space thinking about this and emotional space thinking about this. And in fact, not doing things in our lives we want to do because of this. So to act like this is just the problem of a few corporate bad actors doing some bad things, it's so much more than that.
Yeah. And I think, again, if we zoom out, it's specifically for women, right? We're told to be thin. To be thin is to be desirable. It's to be sexy. It's to be cute. And if you don't have that body type, people have literally shared stories and experience of like, I'm not going to go to the beach because I'm a size 10 instead of a size 2. And so I don't want to be seen in a bathing suit. And when I stop and think about the real life implications of that, of women excluding themselves because of this fear and this shame around how we look, it's nothing but heartbreaking. And I myself have felt it. I don't say this from a pedestal of, I've never dealt with that. I absolutely have, especially when I was younger. And I think being a teen is really tough in many ways. But I would hate to go to the beach, or I would hate to show my arms because they weren't toned enough. But again, when we think about that, women opting out or people creating spaces where it can only be a certain body type, now there's an even bigger barrier to changing that narrative because people don't feel welcome there. And so now the conversation is only being had by a certain type of person. It's creating more of an echo chamber than it is an actual dialogue. So I just want to say, just to be your cheerleader here, if you are feeling shame around your body, if you are feeling insecure, I really hope that you are able to move past that and to say, I guess I don't want to sound like you can do it, but I do want to say like, this is fucked up and everyone should feel good about themselves. I certainly don't have all the answers, and I don't know your own journey with your own body, but my hope is that you will take up space literally, figuratively, emotionally, and that you will feel good in the body you have today. Go out and affect change in whatever way feels good for you.
The incredible poet Audre Lorde, who is Black and lesbian and just an incredible human, has a quote: "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." And I think that that's sort of the mantle that we all need to hold up, that taking care of ourselves, this is where it gets really tricky with the wellness stuff. We're sold this notion that taking care of ourselves is restricting our calories, trying to lose weight all the time, trying to exercise at a certain level that may be unhealthy, doing all these things that feel like a standard we can't possibly hold, and that we're doomed to fail at because of, biology and science. But the problem is then quotes like that get commodified themselves and get held up as this banner at yoga events or other wellness events, or that's kind of the idea behind Goop selling a stone egg that you're supposed to put in your vagina for like $100 and acting like that is going to improve your wellness, of trying to get us to shell out more money for products or things that are tied to weight or making our skin more luminous. Or we didn't even get into beauty in this. That's a whole other part of it. But it's looking out of like, there are these wonderful kernels of truth in so much of this, like in yoga, like we talked about in the last episode. It's not those kernels, it's how it's all packaged and sold to us and the effect that it has on us, of feeling like we're not doing a good enough job on self-care. Like maybe actually eating that chocolate cake and not telling yourself is bad is the most important self-care thing you can do right now. Maybe not spending money on that thing that's going to make you feel cute in yoga class is the best thing you can do. Maybe skipping the diet. Like really the science is there that staying fat or staying a little overweight is better for you than going up and down all the time. That might be the very best thing you can do, is just opt totally out of diet culture.
A practice that I adopted a few years ago was to stop commenting on women's bodies. Just flat out, I can say someone, you look great, or I do often give the compliment like your skin is amazing, because amazing skin is really incredible. But I have stopped saying, you look great, have you lost weight? Or you're looking so thin, or I have stopped drawing praise with body size, because it has nothing to do with it. It's been so amazing. And I think it's helped me in my own body. I am definitely at my most comfortable I've ever been with my body. And I'm not at my thinnest. I'm not at my fittest. I was a college athlete. I used to be able to run for days. And now, it's been a long time since I went for a run. But I think just removing myself from that narrative and refusing to draw other people into it with me has been so wonderful. And it's just a private action. I didn't get up on my soapbox about this. Is just something I decided to do. And it's been really great. So that's a nice experiment that I encourage other people to try in their own lives. It's a way to opt out of this without having to spend any money and without having to, again, rally the troops for it.
I love that. I also love the idea of watching our own vocabulary. So a few years ago, I had decided to stop saying the word busy, which seems really little and it's not really relevant to this, but I'll explain how it is. When I stopped describing myself as busy, I actually felt less busy. And I think we have this kind of cult of busyness in this country where everyone's busy and everyone's so slammed. And in truth, we are, the biggest thing we could actually all do to be healthier is to have less work stress. But we have a work culture and an economy that doesn't allow for that. And so it's much easier to talk about weight loss and, to buy an expensive mattress and think you're magically going to get a great night of sleep without addressing all the sources of stress in your life at work or socioeconomically and so on. But when I stopped saying busy, it truly did make me feel less busy. And so I tried the same thing with the word fat. So I no longer am allowed to say, oh, I look fat, I feel fat, I, look gross in this. I'm not allowed to comment on myself either, in addition to not commenting on other people. And I'm not going to say I walk around thinking I'm amazing. I definitely don't. I'm still a person who was raised in a society that taught me that I will never be good enough and taught me that I should hate myself because that's how women are socialized. But I will say it's been a huge positive and it has changed things for the better. And so even if it's within my own brain only, it's my little personal act of resistance that I do. And then with friends, if we're all doing that game of let's all hate on our bodies, I've started, instead of contributing to it, I'll say, let's stop hating on our bodies. Let's all say something really nice about ourselves. And it's a little thing that, I'm not trying to change every person with that. But if we can just for a moment appreciate ourselves instead of only focusing on the bad, to me, that's a very powerful act too.
There's a scene in Sex and the City where I think they're at Carrie's apartment and they're all Carrie's I hate my nose, and Charlotte's all, I hate my thighs. And Samantha doesn't say anything. And they turn and look at her where's your contribution? What do you hate about yourself? And she says, I don't hate myself. I love everything about my body. And they're all ugh, eye roll. And, Sex and the City, we know I have my problems with. But I always thought that was a really powerful scene because, again, Samantha didn't hop in and bag on herself. She also didn't say what you have chosen to say of we should love ourselves. She just simply opted out. And then when pressed was yeah, I don't hate myself. And that is revolutionary. Women are taught to hate ourselves. The world wants us to hate ourselves. There is no right way to be a woman. Everything is, you're either too loud, you're too quiet, your boobs are too big, your boobs are too small, et cetera, et cetera. And so I really think there's a lot of power in just simply stepping back and saying, I'm just not going to participate in this in whatever way feels right for you. But truly, God, I feel at the phrase, I'm just saying it so much, but opting out, opt out, baby.
It's funny because I definitely remember that scene. It's so telling that it's Samantha who is the one who says she doesn't hate herself, because she is also used in virtually every episode as the one who isn't the woman, quote, in quotes. She is the most masculine of them, the one who doesn't play the woman's game. She has sex like a man with no attachments. She's powerful at work like a man. And then they let there be these little reveals of her crying and being affected by things. And, actually she is a woman after all. But that's again one of those moments of like tying this idea of hating yourself to the trait of femininity as we define it in our culture. And so it is a really powerful scene, but also in a weird way, it upholds exactly what we're talking about, that women are supposed to hate ourselves and be constantly dieting and trying to change ourselves, and men are allowed to like themselves.
Ooh, I agree and I also disagree.
Ooh, bring it.
Dun, dun, dun. Because I do think there's a lot of, I agree that Samantha definitely has like traditional masculine overtones to her character, like for sure. But at the end of the day, that scene is for women and a woman saying that. And so the literal fact is we got to hear a woman on primetime television say, I don't hate myself. And I think that's really important. Now, Sex and the City is a flawed show, and so I agree with your premise, but I don't think that actually takes away from the power of it. And I think especially in a show like Sex and the City, where they're so caught up in looks and all of them are so thin and they go out of their way to uphold the patriarchy in a lot of ways. I stand by that scene as actually like a shining moment, not just for the show, but as like a really powerful sentiment.
I respect that. I think in this case, agree to disagree, because I think like it is a great moment. It is a sentiment we need more. It's just this sort of subtext of it that's like, hey, be less like a woman and more like a man in this way. And that's sort of like what we've talked about before when we've talked about toxic masculinity, or we've talked about privilege, that the goal shouldn't be for women to be more like men. It should be for, in many cases, men to be more like women. Like maybe not in this case, we're not asking for men to hate themselves. In this case, maybe it is for us to be a little bit more like how men are socialized, but it's more like, how can we find this middle place that isn't overly gendered in either direction, where we're all allowed to be, and that isn't a comment on our gender at all. That's just a comment on being humans. I think about the Mindy Kaling quote a lot, who we love Mindy Kaling. Her books are wonderful. Her various shows are wonderful. Her movie Late Night that she did earlier this year with Emma Thompson, so good. Please see it. But she has the quote that have we had it on the show before, or have we just like tweeted it or put it on Instagram? She says, people's reaction to me is sometimes, I just don't like her. I hate how she thinks she is so great. But it's not that I think I'm so great. I just don't hate myself. And the scary thing I have noticed is that some people feel really uncomfortable around women who don't hate themselves. So that's why you need to be a little bit brave. And I think that's really what we're talking about here. We're quibbling over the details of something, but truly the point is, all this stuff that masquerades as wellness is contributing to this idea that we are supposed to hate ourselves. And we don't have to. We can, in fact, not do that. I haven't quite figured out the trick to that, but I'm working on it. And I think we should all be questioning and rejecting all this stuff that's telling us that we are not enough.
I do agree with that. We should be questioning and rejecting the stuff that's telling us we're not enough. You are enough as you are. I am enough as I am. And I also think within that acceptance is endless room for growth and change. And that's amazing too. Who I am today and how I look today, that might change in the future. And frankly, before we started recording, I was sharing about how many Twix I've been eating recently. And like, that should probably change. I've been eating a lot of Twix and they're not healthy. But I'm not going to stop eating Twix because I'm like, oh, I don't want to weigh an extra 3 pounds because of these Twigs. I'm going to stop eating Twix because like I'm in my 30s and my body doesn't process sugar as well as it once did. I get tummy aches. So I think that's also too, like we kind of are constantly redefining enough for ourselves, and we're also constantly redefining health for ourselves.
So even though we've now had 2 parts to talk about wellness, it still feels like there's a lot to say. But I think getting to spend 2 episodes talking about kind of the physical exercise aspect of it, the diet culture side of it, how fundamentally so much of wellness is really tied up in how much we weigh, what we look like, how the world perceives us. Hopefully that's given you a lot of good reason to be very skeptical of anything that claims to be wellness culture and claims to be in the category of quote unquote self-care.
And if you have any good articles, Twitter threads, please, we definitely want to read them and hear from you. You can find us, as always, fairsense@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter @fairsense and Instagram @fairsense.
If you've been enjoying the show, we'd really love your reviews. They are so helpful to the show. They help validate us for sponsors. They help others find the show. So it really means a lot to us when you send us those nice reviews and notes and all of it. We love it.
Yes, really and truly, thank you for all your support in whatever way, a retweet, an email, a review. It really does help us. We are a small DIY podcast, so thank you.
All right. Well, we will be back with you in December with a new 2-parter, and we'll keep you in suspense on what it's going to be about, but it will be a hot topic. I can promise that much.
We keep it spicy here. So until December, stay rad.
Stay rad. Fairer Sense are Kara Perez and me, Tanya Hester. Editing by me. Our theme song is by The Insider, and all other music is courtesy of the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. You can always find me at ournextlife.com and Kara at bravelygo.co. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. And occasionally when they're bad, then they give us ammo for future shows.